All right, Doe. So tell me a little bit about American values and what you've been reading with American values and
In my
religion.
social work, one
I
of the
mean,
social work books
do you have any ear things?
I do. I'll have to go get them. Hold on a minute.
Me too. Hold on. Note to self, always have your earplugs in when you get on Blab. Hello. Amateurs, amateurs. Oh, the hair on a Saturday morning. No makeup. Okay, I'm going to drop in pewforum.org. Go to that. Heads up, drop-ins won't show in recordings or audio archives yet, but we're working on it. Okay.
Okay, so let me plug in.
Okay, I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Hello?
I'm not hearing you.
I can hear you fine. Hello?
I've been having trouble with my sound.
You may need to update your browser.
Headphones.
Not
Okay,
browser.
now I've got it. Now I've got it.
Okay.
So can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hallelujah. All right. So, Doe, is there any way you can move away from that window with the back, that bright window?
Not really.
Okay.
I can turn a little bit.
Well, that's too dark then. Go back where you were, please. Sorry.
Well, let me turn the light on.
Okay. Sorry, everybody. We'll get started here in a minute. Oh, I could pause the recording. Okay, so go ahead.
So the book that I started reading to prepare for a new course that I'm doing in the fall in social work is called Human Behavior in the Social Environment, Macro Level Concerns Practice. And a lot of it I was very familiar with. A lot of the same theorists, a lot of the same thinkers in religious studies are also referred to in the practice of social work. Or the teaching of social work. But there's one chapter in particular called Culture and Society that really blew me away, in part because some of the things that I already know about from studying religion, I'm hearing it again from just a different theoretical or professional perspective. And so this chapter is about social patterns that get passed from generation to generation.
Okay, and hold on, Doe. I didn't tell people that Doe has a PhD in religious studies and teaches religious studies. So I just wanted to say that. I don't even know if my sound is working very well. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. We'll see how it records.
And of course, the idea is that social workers should, obtain education that makes them culturally aware, so that they can, effectively and skillfully treat their clients. But what really grabbed me was the values. And I know this, even if we're not aware of it, even if we're not religious at all, we swim around in a Protestant fishbowl. The values, American values, have historically been synonymous with Protestant values. And of course, Calvinist Protestantism specifically, and what we inherited from the Puritans was this idea that individuals are responsible for their own salvation, for their own well-being. And so when religious conservatives, claim to support the family or be concerned about the family, what they're talking about is just as in other instances and in other populations, what they're talking about is a particular kind of family. It's not an extended family, it's a nuclear family, right? And every individual should strive to be an individual, be responsible for themselves. They are responsible for themselves. And so what blew me away about the chapter was specifics about the differences between, distinctions between how what Americans value, cultural values for Americans versus cultural values for for Europeans, and even Japan and China, Asian, countries. So first of all, there's a religious relationship to work, that it has religious meaning to be busy. And this is one of the reasons why popular culture is problematic for many Christians in America, because it's seen as, per the Puritans or following the Puritans, it's seen as wasting time.
I see.
Right? Every second has sacred meaning to it, and so you should never be wasting time. So Americans are focused on work and preparation for work. We have the fewest, according to the book, quote, Americans have the fewest number of paid vacation days per year in the industrialized world.
Wow.
Quote. And compared to other industrialized nations, U.S. workers generally work longer hours and have no guaranteed vacations.
So what does that say about American values?
Well, we value hard work. And so that's why we don't value the arts, because we think artists are slackers. Writers are slackers.
Yeah.
They're not out, earning a living by the sweat of their brow. Fiction was seen, and still is in many religious communities, as being a waste of time and really, leading to the devil's gate, devil's front door. So waste of time is perceived as a deadly sin. And so when we see people relaxing, we think they're lazy. We call them lazy.
But aren't there a lot of Americans who do relax?
Yes, but there's a limit. It's kind of like that meme or that article that I shared on Facebook about how Americans have got grieving wrong. It's a similar kind of thing.
Yeah, that we don't allow people to grieve.
Right. So we'll allow them to grieve for maybe a year. And it's the same kind of thing, like we're not even aware of where they come from, but we have these ideas that if you watch so much TV a week, you're a slacker. There's something wrong with you. You're lazy. If you don't do your homework, you're lazy. Whereas there may be all kinds of reasons why a teenager or a young adult in college might not do their homework. They may be incredibly depressed. They may be, stressed in other ways. In any case,
I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I was just like...
No, that's okay. So we believe in equal opportunity, but that's not the same thing as equality, right? Again, emphasis, this focus on the individual that has us say, I'm responsible and you're responsible. So this is the difference between the social gospel and fundamentalism, essentially. Fundamentalist Christianity is, there's this idea that the social gospel people believe that people could not pull themselves up by their bootstraps if the system was rigged against them. And so the social gospel people in the early 1900s, they were, committed to creating or advocating for systems that work. Whereas the a more individualistic conservative view would be, a religionist view would be, no, you're the sinner. And so you're responsible for the sin. If things aren't working for you, you need to look to see what you can do different, what you can do better, because you're the reason why you're not successful. You're the reason why things aren't working out.
Yeah, so that's the American individualism, and why Americans are they're so suspicious of socialism, anything looks like socialism, because American values at their base have to do with the individual pulling themselves up by their bootstrap, or it's all your achievements are your achievements, and maybe somebody helped you a bit, but it's all about you.
Whereas and so there's the distinctions that the book makes include individualism versus collectivism. And another one is independence versus interconnectedness. And so you can see, just by hearing the categories that are being used, I mean, you can just look at American culture and say, oh yeah, I see that. We value independence over interconnectedness. We may say that we value families, but we only value a particular kind of family, and we only will support it if it looks like XYZ. Materialism versus spirituality. We're really a materialistic. I mean, it's true what we get criticized for, that we're, by other countries, that we're materialist as opposed to a spiritual spiritual concerns. Or maybe we what it is, what a scholar of religion would say is that America has sacralized work and sacralized materialism. And again,
so say a little bit about that it's become it's all, actually their work has become their religion. Is that what that means? Or
it just becomes a marker, or it's work becomes sacred, and not in, and it may be in the way, not only in the sense that many people today are fortunate enough to be able to cultivate careers that fill them up, that they really want to do. But it's not just that; it's that working as a spirit has become, or was always in America, a spiritual virtue. A Protestant spiritual virtue. So if you didn't work,
that made you good. It's like you're good if you work.
Right. Yeah. And that was one way, because of the Calvinist predestination, the idea that God's already determined who's going to go to heaven and who's going to go to hell, and there's no way to know. But with some theological wrangling, we can look at the Bible and say, well, there's enough in here, or at least this is how Calvin saw it. And of course, this is all very surface. This is very superficial analysis. But if we can't tell we may not be able to tell who God has favored, but accumulation of wealth, the fact that we are doing well, is a sign of God's favor. Can be a sign of God's favor. And
so is the opposite true also?
Oh yeah.
So if you're not doing well, then
too. So if you're not doing well, there's something wrong with you. You're not holy enough. And you see this you see this I see this in my religious tradition that I came out of, and I'm sure you see it too. The idea that
there's something,
you're doing something wrong.
Connected to your economic health and financial health.
It's not a systematic problem. It's a problem with you, the individual. Nuclear family versus extended family, moralism. And this is the one that got me: moralism versus compassion. And the text says, quote, "A carryover from Puritanism, moralism is indeed one of the singular features of American society. As described by political scientist Seymour Lipset, 1997, quote, "America is the most moralistic country in the developed world. That moralism flows in large part from the country's unique Protestant sectarianism and ideological commitments." So,
So being
Trotman,
moralistic, talk about that a little bit.
okay, so Trotman, 1989, defined moralism as the tendency to be judgmental about affairs and events.
Mm-hmm.
This notion to Americans is sufficiently pervasive that poverty becomes a moral issue and money becomes the focus of moral judgment.
Hmm.
Domestic issues, even technical matters such as stem cell research and gun control, become moral questions when you live inside of that kind of a world.
So what would
Punitiveness.
be another kind of world, like we comparing,
Okay, so
say, French culture
we're
with?
going to get to this, but
Okay.
I really love this quote.
Okay.
Punitiveness is a cardinal American value that is difficult for U.S. citizens to explain to outsiders. You know, why are you so, why? Well, it's the eye for an eye, right?
Mm-hmm.
thing. But, and it's not unique to American society. You know, this happens in Japan as well. Let's see, let me find. Blah, blah, blah,
So what's
blah,
the thesis also? I don't mean to take you away, but of that chapter, what's the point of that chapter? What are they trying to do? Raise people's consciousness about our value system and the impact that it has on both us as individuals and the society?
Yeah, the purpose of this chapter, it says, was to provide an overview of cultural norms and expectations as relevant for macro level generalist practice. So, of course, it's writing to social workers.
Uh-huh.
So to understand the influence that a group's values and beliefs has on people.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
So what are the implications for you as someone who is getting a degree in social work and wants to work with people who are transitioning out of one religion to another, or to no religion, or just, doing that kind of, what are the implications of that to you? Is there a connection there?
Well, yeah, because if you know what people value, then you can better support them in whatever. So because Americans value, I mean, you can see the distinctions between early Mormonism and 19th century Protestant culture, and why there was such a backlash against Mormonism, because they had a communitarian, right? At the time, they valued communitarianism and they practiced communitarianism. And so,
and then came polygamy, and that was anti-nuclear family, right?
Right.
So it violated the sexual mores of the time.
Right. And so there was some, it wasn't just like, oh, monogamy is actually the least followed form of marriage practice in the world, and more people are polygamous. And I don't even know if this is true.
Yeah, but certainly there are countries that
there are societies all over the world that practice. So it's impossible to just look and say it was impossible for them, given their prevailing worldview, the prevailing Protestant worldview.
Sorry.
Sex should be highly regulated, and so on and so forth. That that wasn't that it couldn't just be live and let live. Yeah. You had to do something about it. You had to get rid of these people, right? So even though Mormons have embraced materialism and embraced American society and culture in many ways, there is still this. So working, just for instance, with transitioning Mormons, just knowing about that communitarian history. Of course, it would depend on whether or not the client was a convert and had, some maybe was juggling several, more than the one Mormon, prevalent Mormon worldview. But it would be important to know that any efforts to try to get a client to just be an individual and not care about what their parents thought about being in the church or out of the church, that's not going to work with most people.
Yeah.
So it's important to know what what your values are.
And what values you may or may not be conscious of too, that are
Right,
operating
exactly.
and that are running you, and that may or may not, because we relate to our values unless we're really, unless we've raised our consciousness, we relate to them as the truth,
Right.
as like these are the right way, is what I want to say about that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
any
this
other
is
way
great.
would be the wrong way. So we are judging
Right.
other people. And it's not that you're saying get rid of values or don't have values or be immoral or amoral. It's simply saying, look, these are the values of this.
And here's where they come from. Although that's what's interesting to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that, I mean, I guess if a client wanted to explore those things, I'd certainly be more than happy to. I mean, that is part of what I can bring to social practice.
Well, and
my knowledge about how
what I can see then is the more you actually help someone uncover their value system or the foundation of that and the origins of it, then the more likely they are and more able they would be to actually choose the values, whether to continue believing that value or operating according to that value, being that value or not.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and choice really is the operative word, because in America, we do get freedom of religion. Of course, there are all kinds of constraints we work against: family constraints, historical constraints. I mean, just all kinds of things. But Americans are choosers when it comes to religion.
Yeah.
Most Americans will change religions at least once, and likely more than once during their lifetimes. Religion in America is always changing. It's never static.
Yeah. And it's interesting.
People are making different choices.
So tell me about choosing different religions. Are we, in one sense, I think we're the most, we have particular, I mean, I'm not speaking from an informed place like you are, as a place of study, but we actually are viewed as pretty religious in a Christian, even though there are multiple religions. But do we choose and move from a religion to a religion more than people in other countries? And what value, and if so, what does that say about our values?
I don't know. In fact, I haven't looked to see.
That's an interesting question.
I mean, Europe has been historically, in the last several centuries, been less religious than
the United States.
Right. Yeah. So, but definitely, I think the individualism, that's an indication of that. That's one of the values that also
freedom to choose, freedom to go from one to another,
freedom
keep looking,
to be mobile. And actually, the textbook talks about mobility, and we're expected to be mobile, and and that's so interesting, because of course you have to talk about geography too. I mean, location, because people on the West Coast are, maybe more mobile than people on the East Coast, or whatever. I'm just blindly, but that's one thing I noticed out on the East Coast when we live in New Jersey, that there were all these families that were huge, huge Italian Catholic families, huge Jewish families, and I mean, by huge, I mean
more than two.
Mean, but generationally,
oh, okay.
All these generations, and they're all there together. And most of them hate being there. And I used to think, why don't they just move? I hate it here. They're miserable here. This is a place that is it's the most densely populated state in our country. And why would they stay here? I mean, there were all these open spaces, right? I come from Texas.
I come from Wyoming.
I lived in Utah. I've lived in California. I mean, in California, there are lots of open spaces, and people don't hesitate, I don't think, to pick up and move. So
why do they stay?
That's I don't know. I assumed it was those values in their community, which is, in the religiously, if you've got a large, numerically large Roman Catholic Italian family, they've probably been there since their families immigrated in, the 18 or 19.
They're rooted there. It's their roots.
And yeah, and they're all there, and they all support each other. So they've got different. There's a little bit less emphasis on individualism
Mm-hmm.
in Roman Catholicism.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you've got, of course, the Holy See. The headquarters of Roman Catholicism is not in the U.S.,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and American Catholics have traditionally been kind of like the thorn in the Vatican's
side.
Yeah, because they don't, they don't want to
follow the way, the strict way.
Like Roman Catholics in the U.S. overwhelmingly use birth control.
Uh-huh.
I mean, they don't all,
Uh-huh.
but
Mm-hmm.
statistically,
and they
they're more
also divorce relatively freely.
And they divorce relatively freely. Yeah. So, I mean, this is the mission field for Roman Catholicism, so to speak. So, and that was always a problem historically.
Yeah.
But so yeah, it's important to know what, and when you talk about values, I mean, another aha moment that I had while reading the book was, so I'm not the only one who sees religion at play here, right? So, because even just talking historically in the book, not specifically in sections that are not specifically about religion comes up a lot, because that is the source very often in the U.S. That ends up being the source of both our conscious and unconscious, unexamined values. I mean, we may not even be aware that we still hold those values, or that we hold them, have ever held them at all.
Yeah.
So anyway,
well,
it's just been really interesting.
That's cool. I'm glad we had this conversation. We need to talk about religion some more on Blab. So we'll have to think up some more topics. Nobody entered the room. We had one that's because we don't know, or they don't know we're out there and we don't have a sexy enough title. But hey, we did it. This is our first Blab, and we'll do another one. Doe, thank you so much for helping me with this. All right.
Did I help you at all?
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm gonna.
I didn't take any notes. I
took some notes. It's perfectly fine. I'm going to shut this down now, and then I'll give you a call on the phone.
Luna says hello.
Hello. Rafa says hello.
Like, let me go.
Okay. I love you too. I'll give you a call.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.